said, the menu of choices, I think we have to be so careful when we are not facing the lyncher's noose, when we are not facing that imminent violence ourselves. We have to be extremely careful about even the implication that those who did not participate were necessarily cowards. Now, Mr. Cain may be a coward. I don't know. But it was always simply a minority of African Americans who were engaged at any point in the civil rights movement, because it was a life and death question. And I can't be certain what choices I would have made had I faced that. But then I think for me the second issue, and this is maybe the thing that made me the most uncomfortable, is I can't remember anyone ever asking a white politician who is of the same age where they were during the sit-ins. As you pointed out in your interview, there were white students who came down to be part of Freedom Summer. There were white allies at every point, and yet we don't consider it a litmus test for white politicians to have had enough moral courage, ethical vision, and American value to have participated actively in the civil rights movement. And I think that for me what was distressing was just the idea that, the later set of questions about, were you in the part of the draft? Did you serve in the Vietnam War? We've asked that of white candidates, of black candidates, of anyone who could have served during wartime. We ask whether or not they did and what that says about their patriotism. But I'm worried when we don't ask white politicians about their patriotism related to how they have or have not stood up for racial equality.
Yeah, we'll get to the Vietnam thing later, and I found out from a lot of my younger viewers that they were confused about why I was asking about the Vietnam thing. I wasn't all gung-ho about you should go to war. It's just that there was a decision that every male had to make at that time in this country, and I was interested in exploring his. Goldie Taylor, I want to go to you, and I just want to say on what Melissa just said, my oldest brother was old enough and was in college at the time that we're talking about here, and he could have participated in the freedom rides going down from Boston, and he didn't. And I've asked him, do you regret having done that? And he answers it comfortably enough, saying, no, I don't regret it. I didn't know enough at the time to think about it. He can talk about it comfortably. He also went on as a lawyer in Boston to handle very important civil rights litigation, so he was probably inspired by that period of time. But it seems to me that people who lived through these historical periods can look back on where they were in them and discuss what decisions they made. And I think we can go into those conversations without necessarily presuming there's a right or wrong answer. But Goldie, what was your reaction to what you heard?
Well, I think that's about right, and I do underline what Reverend Sharpton said earlier in the broadcast, that, Herman Cain was living right here in Atlanta, Georgia. He'd been turned away from the University of Georgia on an application there and wound up at Morehouse College, which was not his first choice. And so that point made. The other point is that, Herman Cain raised this issue in his own book. And so we know that everything you do, say, and write, everything you don't do, don't say, and don't write is really going to be open game in your adult life if you're running for president of the United States. And so this is scrutiny that he has got to welcome. I don't begrudge you for asking the question. I think I was very uncomfortable in how he chose to answer it. If he said that his road was different, that his goal was different, that his way in fighting civil rights was in showing how he could be a more accomplished human being, then maybe, I would have been a bit more with his responses. But he was righteously indignant last night. I think that to live here in Atlanta, to be in the cradle of the civil rights movement at Morehouse College in the middle of the Atlanta University Center, no less, when students were actively organizing, when they were actively organizing sit-ins, they were huddling at Pascal's restaurant. Atlanta school systems were beginning to integrate. Change was happening all around him, and if he made the choice, and the choice was his, not to get involved, then he should be able to rightly explain that choice and explain why he took a different trajectory. And that's my real problem with Herman Cain, is that, he stays on his message, but when he's asked a tough question, he seems to falter. And I think that's going to be a real question for a man who wants to be president of the United States, the toughest job in the entire world, on this entire planet, leader of the free world. I think he ought to be able to answer, honest questions in books about books and writings that he has done.
Reverend Al, on what Goldie just said, I'd like you to also help us take our younger viewers back to 1963, 1964, 1965, Herman Cain's college years and what was going on in this country. September 16th, 1963, of course, those of us who are old enough to remember will always remember that that's when the 4 African-American girls were killed in the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham. We lost Addie Mae Collins, Cynthia Wesley, Carol Robertson, Denise McNair. 1964, the middle of his college career, was Freedom Summer. That's when the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee was really getting geared up and doing so in Atlanta. But, Reverend Al, fill in some of that wallpaper of the time that surrounds the period that we're talking about here.
Well, first of all, you not only had the Birmingham 4 that were bombed and killed, you had the March on Washington, you had the killing of Medgar Evers, you had all of that. But let me say this. I think that I agree with both Goldie and Melissa. He had the right not to be involved. What he does not have the right is to rewrite history by saying that blacks were brainwashed by becoming Democrats. Because when blacks became Democrats, my parents were Republicans. As I said, Dr. King's family was. I'm 9 or 10 years younger than Mr. Cain, and I joined the movement later on in the 60s when I was still a teenager. I don't begrudge him for not making my choice, but I do begrudge him for acting like we're brainwashed because we went with a party that stood up for the Civil Rights Act of 64 and the Voting Rights Act of 65. There's a reason blacks did not stay with the Republican Party. So I think when he stepped into calling people brainwashed and totally discarded the fact that it was based on public policy that people made their political choices and, in fact, changed their choices from the party of Lincoln, I think it became fair game to question him on his personal decisions. He didn't say that. Then he comes not only in an incendiary way, I think, in answering your questioning, I think that he really stepped over the bounds today when he says that America made it possible for him to be prosperous rather than those that changed America made it possible for him to be prosperous. So if I were to give him the benefit of the doubt last night, he certainly closed the door today because he basically discounted what the civil rights movement did. Herman Cain it was not required that he be involved in the movement, but for him to act like the movement, not the normal status quo America, was responsible for his success is a distortion and factually inaccurate and offensive to me.